Ready? Good. All right, we're going to get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Joel Spolsky. I came without slides. I'm the co-founder of Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is a website that represents 16 million professional developers, people whose actual job is programming, and probably about 25 million more who are forced to program through no choice of their own. It's not their job. The demand for developers is obviously much, much higher than 16 million programmers. The number of jobs for programming is very high. This kind of conference, what you see is a lot of people working on increasing the number of developers by finding new ways to teach people how to program. And I am a huge fan of that. Go ahead, teach people how to program. If you ask people who have learned how to program recently, how did you learn how to program? They usually say blank and Stack Overflow. For example, Code Academy and Stack Overflow, or General Assembly and Stack Overflow. The way that people are really learning how to program is they kind of try things on the computer, and then they don't work. And then they type those questions into a search engine, and they land on Stack Overflow. And then Stack Overflow is the just-in-time learning that fills all those gaps. Now, the actual learning how to program, even though that's something that we focus on, is something that I think most programmers will eventually hunt and gather for themselves from all kinds of sources. They can always find a book or a website to tell you stuff. But the real education I think that's important is a little bit more of a liberal education, and that's where my talk is going to go. And I'll get to that in a minute. But first, starting from first principles, what is it that programmers are doing all day? What does their job really consist of? If you follow them around, here's what you see them doing. The first thing you'll see is that 5% of their time, I made that up, 4.8, 5% of the time is actually spent typing code into a computer. The other 95% is meetings. Now, the other 95% is trying to figure out why that perfectly straightforward and normal code that you just typed into the computer is not doing the obvious, perfectly obvious, straightforward and normal thing that you thought it was going to do. And that's what makes programming hard. Computers are really, really fussy. They're super literal. They need to have everything explained down to the smallest detail. They become unbelievably literal about doing exactly what you told them that you wanted it to do. So it's like you ask Siri if it's raining, and Siri says, "No, Dave, it's sunny today." And so you wear a t-shirt and you go outside and it's pouring and it's cold and you get soaked. And then you discover that maybe you turned off location services and Siri decided, I don't know where you are, you must be in Cupertino, California, where it was sunny. And so you say, "Hey Siri, why didn't you tell me it was raining?" And Siri says, "I don't know what that means, Dave," even though your name isn't Dave. So you say, first of all, stop calling me Dave, and second of all, why did you say it was raining? And Siri doesn't even answer that because you didn't start the sentence with, "Hey Siri." And this kind of maddening interaction is hilarious, and it happens to all of us all the time that we deal with computers, and to a developer, that's their job. It's just having these kinds of crazy conversations with mentally challenged trash cans all day long. And that's why I think like literally every other job is easier than programming, and that's where the learning comes in. Let's say you're a taxi driver. You get in the taxi, you turn the wheel to the right. What happens? 100% of the time, the taxi goes to the right. So that's why I consider that to be an easy job. Now imagine what would happen if you turn the wheel to the right, and sometimes the taxi went to the right, but sometimes the radio went on. Or like if you're coming out of the airport and you turn right, the trunk pops open. And that's literally what happens in programming. You turn right, you come out of the whatever, you take a right turn, the whole taxi literally disappears without a trace. There is no taxi. There's no passenger. The problem was that the passenger was wearing a shirt with stripes, but there is no way to ever figure that out because the taxi has disappeared. And that's what our life is like as developers. So how do we do with it? How do we deal with this? We go crazy. And I actually do know some technology companies that just hire psychiatrists, and that's one way of dealing with it. The way that you deal with this is that you ask people for help. And you could ask your coworkers, or you could ask the whole internet, and the internet smells better. So we have these online discussion forums, and you ask your coworkers, "Hey, I tried to turn right, and it usually works, but every time I come out of the airport and I turn right, the trunk pops open. What's going on? What's wrong here?" And hopefully somebody knows the answer, and they answer your question. So over the years that programming has been popular, ever since the internet was invented, and even before the internet was invented on Usenet, we were asking these questions as developers. We were asking these questions on discussion forums. They were filling up with thousands of question and answers on every imaginable topic. Those questions and answers were written by developers just trying to help each other out. And it got so that you didn't even have to write the question because somebody had already asked the same question about turning right. You just searched, what's that thing called? Google. You searched Google, and what you found is people from 2 years ago who were literally asking the question about the airport with a trunk popping open when you turn right and how to fix it, and you found the answer right there. So you didn't even have to do any work. You got your answer. The online forums were magical. Developers all over the world were sort of spontaneously coming together, helping each other out, sharing their knowledge. It was all very beautiful, answering the hard questions. And then those conversations, those forums stayed on the internet forever, and we found them on Google, and that was great. Now, for a really, really long time, and I don't know the exact years, but before Stack Overflow, the biggest of these online forums was called Experts Exchange. It was a site called Experts Exchange, and one day in the middle of the dot-com crash, the company that owned Experts Exchange ran out of money. They had a bunch of volunteers, not a bunch, thousands of programmers around the world, voluntarily helping each other out with programming problems. And they couldn't figure out how to make money from this. So they came really close to closing down. At the last minute, new owners came along, bought the company, and solved the problem by putting up a paywall. And the paywall said, yep, we got your answer. Somebody has already figured out how to keep the trunk from popping open. But if you want to read the answer, you have to become a member for the low, low price of $20 per month, US currency or equivalent, payable in advance, MasterCard and Visa, welcome. And we were pissed off, we developers, by this. We were basically offended as developers by being asked to pay to read our own answers that we ourselves had written. And then they added insult to injury, and they said, hey, you know, if you do some work answering questions for free, maybe we'll give you a free month. And that was even more insulting. And it also resulted in the lowest quality programmers writing all of the answers, and that was not helpful. So in 2008, Jeff Atwood and I co-founded, we decided to put them out of business, essentially. That was our only goal. We were not in this to make a startup that would be successful. We just wanted to put Experts Exchange out of business. They're mostly out of business. They're still operating, technically. And that's why we created Stack Overflow. I had been, by 2008, I had spent about 8 years as a developer advocate, which I started blogging about software development in 1999. And the thing that I was most concerned about was the way that developers were treated, not just by Experts Exchange, which was trying to rip us off, but by most of our employers, essentially. And that was sort of the interchangeable assembly line worker. You are a typist if you are a programmer. There are these business super geniuses, not you, and they hire developers who are, you know, supposed to type the stuff into the computer, and there was this assumption that monkeys could do it. And we were treated pretty much like monkeys, maybe worse than monkeys, depending on the zoo. Monkeys have habitats and bananas and stuff. Developers were sort of put in the darkest cubicles, kind of in the middle of the office with no windows, the fabric-lined cubicles. The cubicles, ironically, are a form of torture chamber that was designed for shuffling paper, and there was no paper left to shuffle because of the programmers had conveniently written programs which eliminated all of that, but we were still stuck in their cubicles. They were generally given the worst computers to work on. They were ignored when it came time to promote people. There was no idea as to how you might promote a programmer because what do they know? And then there was this obnoxious website, Experts Exchange, where you were supposed to pay to read the answers that you yourself had written voluntarily in order to help somebody. So that's not what I believe. I don't believe that programming is typing. I actually think that developers, what they're doing all day long is writing a script for the future. What does that mean? I woke up one morning, just think about your day, and I'll give you an example of the first 5 minutes of one of my days. I wake up, I was wearing a little jawbone wristband, and it was sort of monitoring how asleep I was, and waited until I was the most awake that I was going to be within a half-hour window, and then vibrated quietly to decide that was the best time to wake me up, so it wakes me up. And that's software, and that's actually a lot of pretty complicated software that's running even before I woke up. So I wake up, I'm checking email on my phone, and now we're talking about millions of lines of software on my phone, on the server, whoever sent me the email. Millions of lines of software that I'm interacting with just to check my email and Twitter or whatever in the morning before I even get out of bed. I get out of bed, brush my teeth. Now, I don't think there is a computer in the toothbrush, but it's only a matter of time. And when that happens, you will be able to download Candy Crush onto your toothbrush. Leave the house to go to the gym, listening to podcasts on my smartphone. They were downloaded automatically while I sleep. Again, software was running thousands of lines of code, millions of lines of code of software that encode exactly what happened. I check into the gym, I run an app, it checks me into the gym, again using software. just the first 15 minutes of my life are mediated through software. Every hour in modern society, you're continuously interacting with software with the work of thousands and thousands of developers. Now, this is a huge change, if you haven't noticed, because when I was a child, I could pretty much go from one birthday to the next without ever using software at all. Pretty sure when I was in 6th grade, my report card was printed by a computer, but other than that, there were no instances of computers anywhere in my life. And now I can't even wake up and go to the gym without using 37 different computer programs, which were written by developers. The developer, so I'm checking into the gym. There's a developer. He's writing the code for that app. He might have had a spec. The spec was probably 4 pages saying, you shall make an app. It shall check people into the gym. There shall be a barcode or something. I don't know. The spec was probably 4 pages of printed English text. And that got translated into a program, and that program is probably 3,600 lines long. And every single one of those lines of code probably has about 5 decisions in it, tiny, tiny decisions that the programmer made in order to construct those lines. And those tiny decisions determine exactly how the program runs. And that is, somebody, in order to write this little app that checks me into the gym, probably made 18,000 little tiny decisions. And there was a spec, and the spec covered 26 of those decisions, and they might have been important, but the other 18,000 and 17,000, and I'm not going to do the math, came from a developer sitting there. And the developer is sitting there writing that code, making those decisions, deciding how the future is going to operate, how I'm going to check into the gym. They're literally deciding how I'm going to wake up and under what circumstances, what I'm going to listen to, and how the podcast will get onto my smartphone. They're literally programming the future, and that is what we call, what the entertainment industry would call writing a script. They would say you're writing a script for the future, and that's what developers do all day long. And you've got the people that sort of thought that they were inventing the future. They I like to blame them on MBAs, but they're not really all MBAs. But there's sort of a class of people that used to boss around programmers 10, 15 years ago, and they think they're very clever, and they wake up every morning and they're awoken by their same jawbone wristband, and they sit down on a high-tech Japanese toilet seat, which probably has 8 different computers in the toilet seat, and they're checking their smartphone, and they're making reservations at Starbucks so that their latte is waiting for them. And then after the Starbucks, they run the Uber app, and then the Uber app says, you know what, could you cross the street because you will get a car sooner on the other side of the street. And now this poor guy is literally crossing the street because the computer told him to, because of a script that was written by a developer who is now making this guy cross the street indirectly through some code that he wrote 4 months ago. And that's nothing. Think about the poor people that work in the warehouse at Amazon. All right, you have a person, and a computer sits there and tells them, pick this item from here and that item from there, and take a number 7 box, put the items in the number 7 box. Okay, you're done. Tape it up, put the sticker on it that comes out of printer number 5, and throw it in truck number 56. And that's all you do all day long. And you think about that when you're the poor dude in the Amazon warehouse, you're just an output device for a computer program that is being written by somebody who's trying to optimize how to get the most stuff in the most boxes out of that warehouse as quickly as possible. And that entire choreographed routine of everybody, not just in the Amazon warehouse, but also all the MBAs going uptown and downtown and Ubers all day long in Manhattan, was all a script that was written by developers. And that's why those little tiny decisions that are being made by those developers all day long, those thousands of tiny decisions, they add up to something that is our life. And that's why I say they're writing the script for the future. And now I've been talking about, hey, we made the person cross the street to get an Uber, or he picked up a number 7 box instead of a number 5 box. But when you think about personal decisions in personal lives, it starts to get really scary or important or critical. The biggest hulking mass of software of all is Facebook. It's not the biggest. Google is a little bit bigger. You got tons of code for Facebook, server code, front-end code, algorithms, ad targeting, mobile apps, web apps, everything. Thousands of engineers are working on Facebook. But think about the kind of stuff that might happen on Facebook. You send a message to your friend. You say, let's go out to dinner. And they say, oh, man, I'm slammed. I can't really make it to dinner. And then they choose one of the many different sad faces that they have on iPhones, some sad emoji character to say that they can't make the dinner. And then the next day you log onto Facebook and you see your so-called friend, and they did go out, they just didn't go out with you. And there's a picture of them taking a selfie at a Britney Spears concert or something with I don't know who, your ex, to make it worse. So they clearly lied about being busy, and now you're sad. Now, the software has literally chosen which picture. You saw this picture. Why did you see this picture? Because there's an algorithm in the Facebook code that decides what to put in your feed. And that algorithm was written by developers. And they decide what you see and what you don't see in your news feed. And they decide that based on the information they have. And they don't know what's in the picture. They don't know how it's going to make you feel. And they don't know that it's your ex. All they know is that there's two people that you're friends with on Facebook due to its autistic algorithm, in which you're either friends or not friends with every single person on Earth. It's a 0 or a 1. And there's two people you're friends with. You're probably going to like this picture, and it shows it to you. And then you get sad. And it's bizarre. The algorithm is not thinking in any kind of real way. It's just doing machine learning. It's like you're likely to, there's a 3% added likelihood that you will click like when you see this particular picture, and 3%, that's worth it. Put it in the feed. And so they put it in the feed. And in this particular case, it makes you realize that your friend doesn't really like spending time with you. And now you're going to be sad for 6 months. So, all right, crossing the street for Uber is one thing. The gym app, the podcast, all that kind of stuff. Facebook is really, really personal, and it's really, really affecting your lives, and there are human beings on there. They did this study. Everything that happens on Facebook is going to affect you emotionally. For almost everything. Facebook did this huge study in 2013 with 689,000 subjects, which is, they're like, oh, that's nothing. That's the smallest number we can do it on. And what they did is they literally just changed what the algorithm was going to send people, and sent some people more happy stories and some people more sad stories based on just like the words in the story. And lo and behold, they discovered that sending people sad stories makes them sad. And sending them, I'm sorry, I can't, it's so obvious. I don't know why they had to do a study. Sending people happy stories makes them happy. And then the point about this is everybody was upset that Facebook was manipulating people. It's like, why are you manipulating us for the purpose of the study? There's actually an ethical problem with conducting a psychological study in which you manipulate people's emotions without the consent of the people that were studied. That would not be allowed by any university to be done to their sophomores. But Facebook did it to 689,000 people. And Facebook said, well, wait a minute, we manipulate people all day long. It's like we're always choosing, unless we are showing you in the feed every single thing that happens on the planet Earth, or even everything that happens to your friends, which we can't, and it would be boring, we're already making some arbitrary decision about what to show you. There is no such thing as a non-manipulated Facebook feed. It's manipulated by definition. It doesn't, it'd be like a GMO-free Facebook. You can't get there. Eventually, the DNA came from somewhere. So there are a million ethical decisions, I think, when you're sitting there, when you're a person at Facebook. By the way, if you think that the answer is, hey, by the way, you know what Facebook should do? Facebook should just always try to make people happy by showing more happy stories. And that's actually even more horrifying, because then all of a sudden you discover, oh God, I didn't know your grandmother died. I guess Facebook didn't want to show me that because it was going to bum me out. You realize that the implications of trying to manipulate what people see, even if it's to make them more happy, are even worse. So essentially you have these kids at Facebook, and in a way they're playing God, but that's a mean thing to say, because if you meet them and you talk to them, you discover that the 27-year-olds working on this stuff take this responsibility very seriously. And in fact, they're working on it in a very serious way. So we used to just have thumbs up, and everybody thought that was good enough. And now we have all the new reaction emojis, which are like sad, emotional, whatever. And that's a lot less autistic, right? The idea that there are only two emotions is literally mentally dysfunctional. But giving you a bunch of extra buttons is going to help a little bit. But when you think about it, literally any decision that's made by those programmers working on that feed is frightening. So that is why I think that the script for the future really, really matters. Somewhere there's a developer working at Uber, and hopefully he's working on the problem of how to optimize the drivers that they find so that I don't have to cross the street to get the driver a little bit faster. Let's just find a downtown driver for Joel and an uptown driver for someone else. And when the developer solves that problem, the script for the future will be a little bit better. It will boss me around a little bit less. Somewhere there is a developer who is trying to decide, for example, under what conditions shall I show you pictures of people that you used to be friends with? And the fact that somebody is even thinking about this at Facebook should worry you. But if it doesn't, go ahead and treat developers like typists and just hire the cheapest ones. But otherwise, the problem is to think about how you find the developer, philosopher, poet, philosopher really first, that can work on the problem of under what conditions. I mean, the real problem that Facebook faces is under what conditions should you be shown pictures of people who you used to be friends with? Or under what conditions should you be shown memories of people who are no longer with us? So that's why I think that the part of programmer education that really concerns me, that I'm really interested in, is not just how to write code. We got that at Stack Overflow easy. We'll just, all those people will copy code that they found on our website. Stop worrying about that. Think about actually how we train students with broader knowledge of the world, of humanity, of human beings, so that they're morally, ethically, and emotionally equipped to make decisions about the script for the future. You don't just, when you want to hire a developer, you don't just grab a full stack web developer as if they were interchangeable. You actually have to cast it. You have to cast that role like you're casting a movie. You have to find the perfect person for that particular job, for that particular situation. And when you find that developer, you have to woo them and you have to treat them like you would treat somebody who literally has the future in your hands, who's literally going to make or break whatever it is that you're doing. So connecting these two stories, sort of the story about developers writing the script for the future and the story that I started with Experts Exchange, is really where Stack Overflow comes from. Experts Exchange started charging us to read our own answers. At the same time as they were doing that, the business world was trying to figure out why they couldn't hire programmers when they treated them like interchangeable assembly line workers. And so that's what we tried to build. How does Stack Overflow work? For those of you that haven't seen it, it's questions and answers. It's a Q&A platform. It's used by every single developer in the world every single day. Developers ask questions, they get answers. We have a couple of really simple inventions. My favorite one is that when you see an answer, anybody that sees that answer can upvote it or downvote it. So if it's a good answer, you vote it up. If it's a bad answer, you vote it down. And this can be a third person or a fourth person or somebody who came along later and found it in Google. They can do the voting. And what that does is that makes the quality of answers on Stack Overflow better than anywhere else, because we can sort the ones with the most votes and show them at the top. And that one feature alone probably is where the quality, it's how we got the high quality of answers that we have on Stack Overflow, and that's how we became the #1 developer website. We're in the top 40 of all websites in the world. We're almost always the first result if you do any kind of programming search on Google. We dominate the front page. Now, what happened to that upvote? If you wrote the answer that got an upvote, boom, you got 10 points. And a little 10 shows up next to your name, and the next time it gets another upvote, you got a 20 next to your name. And those internet points, it seems like a game, but they mean that you were right, and that somebody recognizes that you were right, and they appreciate your answer. And the community is starting to trust you. So as you earn more and more of that trust, you write more and more answers, you're starting to create a record on Stack Overflow that you're a good developer. And then you know a thing or two about a thing or two. And so that leads to the second part of our plan, which is that now we can go get great jobs for the great developers, especially the ones that are peer-reviewed. And so instead of making money like Experts Exchange tried to by kind of putting up a paywall, we have this other business model, which is to charge companies that need to hire developers to access our database, to find the developers, and to get access to them, to message them, and to communicate with them. So Stack Overflow elegantly solves these two problems at the same time. We solve the problem of how programmers can help each other with questions and answers, and we solve the problem of how you can recruit great developers and identify great developers in the wild if you need to hire them. Developer writes good answers, they get the upvotes, that leads to reputation, which you use to get a better job, and it's sort of a multiple step process, but that's kind of the magic behind Stack Overflow. In conclusion, most of us have to live in the future. I'm getting kind of old, so maybe I will not be so lucky. But the business of right now, in the present, you kind of wake up and before breakfast, you probably run millions of lines of software or millions of lines of software run on your behalf. That's just the beginning. I think we're probably 10% of the way there of how much our lives will be infused with software. And I think in the future, we're going to be like those Amazon workers where hopefully we're having a great life, but literally everything that we have to do, everything that we try to do is in some way mediated by software, infused by software. And if you want your life to be happy and fulfilling, then you should care about who those developers are that are making all those decisions, the tiny ones and the big ones in that software. And Stack Overflow is all about helping developers learn, share their knowledge, and improve their careers. It's all about fixing the code and fixing the algorithms and fixing the future. Thank you very much.